looking like she's in her 20s, and she's 40, but
Mhm.
looking like she's in her 20s, and they're thinking like, what could this girl possibly know? Or sitting at the boardroom, and they look at her and they're like, whatever, you
Mhm.
know, all these white men, right? Older
Yep.
white men who are in their 50s
Mhm.
and or maybe 60s, and they're looking at her like, why are you even here?
Right,
You
another
know,
reason to discount her opinions, right?
exactly.
We wanna have diversity in the room because we wanna get all the
Mhm.
best ideas, except we're
Yeah,
gonna discount all of your ideas.
exactly. Because not only are you a woman, but you're also a Black woman. And I don't know what age you are. So you look about the same age as my daughter. So you're a child.
Hey, I'm Teen Zekas.
And hey, I'm Ilika Follette. We are business owners and moms with corporate backgrounds, and we are all about getting Black women paid in both corporate and business.
And you're listening to the Getting Black Women Paid podcast.
Let's go.
Hello and welcome to the Getting Black Women Paid podcast. I am Teen Zekas, your pivot and pay strategist.
Hey, and I'm Ilika Follette, your business strategist.
And today we are talking about ageism. I have talked with so many clients about, how many years should I put of experience on my resume? Should I put the dates that I graduated?
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a frustrating topic to me because, I know we've talked about this briefly, but I'm Nigerian. My dad is Yoruba,
Mm-hmm.
and in Yoruba culture, elders are so revered,
Right.
and it's so wild to me that when you're applying for a job, you need to pretend you're not old. Like, oh, I want to look like I have less experience and less
Mhm.
expertise and what, and so to me, it's so wild because I'm
Yeah,
like, those should be the people we want the most.
exactly.
But we already know Black women are often overqualified for the job. And that's one of the things we get told, oh, you're too qualified. And
Yeah.
it's like, so we got ageism on that side, and then also age discrimination for young people.
Mm-hmm. You're a
I've
child. You can't do this.
right. People will put, yeah. I actually had a friend of mine was actually told by her CEO, she was going to be speaking at an event about Gen Z,
I remember you told me.
and she was like, who would want to be listening to someone from Gen Z? They have nothing to say. Like, said it to her face. Like,
Yeah,
like you have nothing to contribute because you're in Gen Z. It's like, what are we
exactly.
talking about? So I kind of want to talk about both ends of the things and the fact that people have no idea how old Black women are.
That part.
I
That
mean,
part. It's
Black don't crack. So we already know that Black women can run the gamut. I have a friend who I always text when one of my aunts has a birthday because they'll post like, some photo shoot like, oh, happy 60th. And my, and my friend will be like, what is that 23-year-old woman doing with that 60 balloon?
right. It's so true. And
Yeah.
it's funny how that works because I didn't even think about that. People don't have a clue how old we are. Like
Mhm.
I remember I was on at some event and what was it? Oh, it was it was like a virtual event and we were all on Zoom. And I went to speak and I said something and I was like, yeah, so being 40 something years old, blah, 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 with four kids. And right afterwards, we had to go in like these breakout rooms and no one spoke about the topic in my breakout room. All they talked about was, I thought we were the same age. And it'd be like 25-year-olds. And one said, I was like, oh my goodness, thank goodness someone my age. When she came on, I was like, your age? I could have
Wow.
worked you.
It's so funny. So many people do assume that you're the same age as them. I
Mhm.
remember I was working with a coach on getting Black women paid, and I was talking about how my target audience was, mid-career Black women who maybe are looking to pivot and something. And she was talking about my logo, and she said, well, if your target is mid-career Black women, that's going to be women in their 30s and 40s, and your logo. I mean, you're gonna have to start talking to Black women in their 30s and 40s to figure out what they like because this is, like that my logo was old fashioned. And I'm
Oh,
like, at the time, I'm like, "I'm 38."
And I like it.
But she was in her 50s, and I think
Yeah.
assumed I was also in my 50s. So for
It's
me, I often get it depends we talked about this, it depends on
mhm.
what my hair looks like.
Yeah, right.
I was growing out my hair for a little while, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I think at that time, a lot of people multiple people thought I was who were in their 50s, thought I was also in my
Yep.
50s, and I'm like, "I'm in my late 30s."
It's so funny though that, like, to your point, especially with other Black women, no matter how we think that someone could be 30, like I know me, someone could be 32, or actually no, I've met people in their like 20s, like 28, right? So a woman could be 28 or 54, and I think that she and I are the same age,
Right,
right? Or
right,
60. I think we're the same age. I
right, that
always
whole range is
say
just that she's probably my age,
yeah,
right.
exactly.
Well,
So
and
it's
for
so funny.
me, I think maybe partly because I'm biracial, like, my mom's side of the family, my mom has said, like, "Oh, you've been cursed with my genes," right? That
Oh,
people have thought I'm older than I am, and I think part of it also is my demeanor. Like, I was when I was in high school, I was
mhm.
mistaken for the mother of other high schoolers 3 different times.
Wild.
Once by our family doctor, and I was like, "No," so I was my
We've
I
seen you
took my
before.
brother I took my older brother to the doctor because he had broken something or he had some injury, so I had to go with him to help him, like, open
Yeah.
doors and stuff.
Mm.
So he was 18, I was 15, and the doctor was like, "Oh, so you must be his mom?" And I was like, "No, I play softball with your daughter." Like,
That's hilarious. So
but
good.
the but what I wanted to talk about specifically is age discrimination and how Black women are treated with what regardless of however we're
Yeah.
perceived, what age we're perceived, people are very confused. But
Mhm.
as you said, then maybe when it does come up, then that's all people wanna talk about, that's all people can think about is, "Wait, you're how
Mhm.
old? You're this oh, you look this way," and whatever, and it's
So
just
shocking. It's it's funny because when someone sees my resume, right, or one of our resumes, we've got 20 years of experience,
Yep.
they're like, "Oh, okay, 20 years of experience, she's older." So now since you're older, it's like, should I bring them in? Should I not? Like, what's the situation, right?
Mhm.
And then you come in and they're treating you like you're a child because in their mind you look young. So
Right, and they're not looking at your
you
resume
can't
once you're
have
working
possibly
there.
exactly, you can't have
Mhm.
possibly done all these things, you
Right,
know?
and so your ideas are just based on, you're just thinking it, you're not basing
Oh,
it on the years of
right.
experience you're like, "Hey, I've tried it, I've done it, this is what we
Exactly,
should do." Right.
exactly. So you're being treated I have a close friend who is, um, she's, like, near sea level, in a major company, and so she was a few years ago, she wasn't at sea level or at that level yet, but she was just below it, and
Mhm.
she would walk in the room, and people knew her name, but they didn't know her. So when she's walking in, they are not expecting her to walk in there
Yep.
looking like she's in her 20s, and she's 40, but
Mhm.
looking like she's in her 20s, and they're thinking like, "What could this girl possibly know?" Or sitting at the boardroom, and they look at her and they're like, "Whatever." You
Mm.
know, all these white men, right? Older
Yep.
white men who are in their 50s
Mhm.
and or maybe 60s, and they're looking at her like, "Why are you even here?"
Right,
You
another
know?
reason to discount her opinions, right?
Exactly.
We wanna have diversity in the room because we wanna get all the
Mhm.
best ideas, except we're
Yeah.
gonna discount all of your ideas.
Exactly, because not only are you a woman, but you're also a Black woman, and I don't know what age you are, so you look about the same age as my daughter, so you're a child. So
Yeah.
you're a Black woman child, right?
Yep.
So what you say does not matter. You
Yeah.
can't even speak up, and thank goodness she has the personality to be like, no, I've got this." But
Right.
if she had been a little more meek and someone who
Mhm.
didn't necessarily say something, she could have been easily run over.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. And what you said about the resume coming in with all the experience versus how you're treated when you get there
Mhm,
resonated so much with me. When I was a kid, I was like 13, and my church was revamping their youth group program
mhm,
for the level just below me. So the
mhm,
kids who were going to be 13, they were trying to figure out, what they were going to do in the program, and they had me come to the meeting as like a youth representative
mhm.
because I was so mature to come talk to them, I guess.
Yeah.
And so in the meeting, they're like, "Well, 13-year-olds like this and 13-year-olds want that and all this stuff." And I said, "Well, I'm 13 and I don't want any of those things." And they said, "Well, yeah, but you're 13 going on 40."
Mhm.
and then proceeded to disregard all of my opinions. And I'm like, so why am I here? Why?
Right, exactly, right.
You brought me here because I'm mature enough to give the child's perspective, but now because I'm so mature, my
Yeah,
perspective is irrelevant.
it's discounted. Yeah.
Right. And so like that's where I think a lot of um, black women who succeed early, who advance
Mhm,
early in life and are doing amazing things in their 20s, I think a
yeah,
lot of them experience that too. Like, what could you even know
mhm,
because
exactly.
you are a child or
Yeah,
what have you?
and especially if they look really young still, you know?
Hmm.
They're being treated that way.
Yeah.
Um, and that definitely impacts, like, how you can show up, and if they're not someone who knows how to maturely handle that, meaning, like, speak up in a way that sets your authority, but isn't
Hmm.
necessarily putting someone down or whatever,
Hmm.
then it shifts everything, right? If they can do that, they've already learned how to do that, which many have not. That's a tough skill to master,
Yeah.
but if you don't know how to do that, then now you're just kinda constantly, shoved aside,
Hmm.
you know, ignored,
So
brushed off.
yeah, so for those who are wondering, okay, so how do I develop that skill? How do I go into a room and regardless of how people perceive my age, whether it is, that I am older and people have opinions about, whether their ageism is going to affect me or whether I'm young and I need to prove myself or what have you. What are the things we need to do to develop that skill to be able to present in a way where we say, "Hey, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm not, um, I guess, coming across as now I'm putting you all down too."
Mhm. I think that it comes down to a couple of things. The first thing is really listening.
Mm,
Listening to what's happening in the room, because what you don't because you want to be able to come with your comment, you want to ensure that it addresses the things that they brought up, right? So you want to
mm,
make sure that you're listening to what's happening. I think the second thing is keeping your cool and your composure.
mm,
So if because some a lot of times, well, I know I've been in these rooms, and I'm sure so many black women have been in these rooms where there's there's these like snide remarks, but they're kind of snarky, or and you
mhm,
can tell that there's an energy there that isn't positive. I'll just say it like that.
right.
And so in those moments, you can feel it, what's happening. And so you can't let that distort you. You can't let that shift
Mm,
what you're doing, because you got to keep your eye focused on the goal, right? The
yeah,
goal is to, achieve beyond this meeting, right? So,
right.
and to get whatever it is that you're like, get your point across, or whatever it is that you're trying to
Mhm,
do, right? So in those moments, you almost have to, like, take kind of that deep breath inside, right? And then stand up, or not stand up, but really, like, speak out to, okay, thank you for your point, like thanking everyone for their opinions and their points. And, love that you said that and that you said that, right?
mhm,
And let's also understand the fact that these things happened and this is where we need to go.
yeah,
So in order for us, like, you have to speak with that authority, and stick to the facts. So if you get in that room and you're all over the place with the conversation, you lose the audience, right?
mm.
Gotta stick to the facts.
Well,
And,
and I love that when you said when you acknowledge what other people brought to the table, you followed that with "and" instead of "but." Right? If you're acknowledging someone else's point and then you change it to, "But I think this," they're already automatically gonna get defensive.
oh, immediately.
Whereas if it's I always think about, like, improv classes where it's like, "Yes, and," right? But it's like, "Oh, great point, and how can
They
we
go
do it in a way that also takes into account XYZ thing," right? And
right.
just framing it in that way where you're building on what they said instead of contradicting what they said. But I
Mhm,
I also wanna add this. There are some things where no matter how we say it, we can say it in the best possible way ever, and people are still going to interpret us as being combative or interpret us as because
mhm,
we are a black woman in that space, especially a opinionated
mhm.
person or someone who comes with experience or what have you. There are people who are going to perceive us in some kind of way.
Yeah.
So I think another really important thing is to try to have an ally in that meeting. Try to talk to someone who's gonna be in that meeting. If you can get close enough to someone that you can be open with them and say, "Hey, like, I've noticed that in some of these meetings, people will take what I said in this kinda way.
Mhm,
If you notice that I've said something and people are not responding, could you speak up and say,
mhm,
"Hey, well, I heard Ilika say this,
Mhm.
and having, unfortunately, probably a white person,
Mhm.
have to reiterate what you said and give you credit for it while they're doing
Right,
it instead of being
exactly.
like making it seem like now it's their idea.
I used to have
But
a manager
but
that did
some of it
this.
might have to be kind of strategically making sure that someone else in that room is
Mhm.
amplifying you,
Mhm.
and reiterating your value to the conversation, because
Mhm.
unfortunately there's no perfect way for us to deliver something that's going to counteract that bias that a lot of people are going to have about us.
Exactly, and a lot of the times it goes back to age. If you're too young, it's like, whatever you said, it doesn't necessarily they don't always look at it as aggressive in those situations. They look at it as childlike. "Oh, it's a child saying."
Naive.
Right, naive, exactly.
Mhm.
And if you're older, now you're aggressive and you're trying to run things and you're trying, and
Right.
it's like there's no in between. There's
Yep.
absolutely no in between. You know what's funny as we're talking about ageism is, um, you know, I remember as a kid, like, vividly being either told or somehow knowing that once you were over about the age of 45, like, you could no longer, like, go after certain roles, like, you like,
Mhm.
it's almost like you it's retirement at this point. Like, I remember that
Yeah.
being a thing.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that being a thing now. I think it's because people have shifted, right? But
Hopefully.
what's always been super funny to me is that I remember being at companies where they had begun to, make or kinda force out the older population. The over
Mhm.
55, the over
Right,
65.
they'll offer a severance package
Mhm.
that's pretty
Yeah.
sweet if you leave.
Mhm.
Um,
Always pushing out the over
mhm.
60 or the over 50.
Which
But
is so
then
wild to me because, again, it's like the institutional knowledge that's going with those people
right.
who've been here for 20 years and you're trying to push them out 30 years.
But
It's
here's
wild.
the other thing. The other thing is that the majority of the presidents of the United States and the current running presidents, the current people running for president are 78 and 81. 81. Yet we're pushing out Mr. 62-year-old,
Or
from
more likely, Ms. 62-year-old.
right, Miss 62-year-old at, IBM or,
Right, like, we're just done
or
contributing.
whatever, right, at 62 or 65 or 67, whatever,
Mhm.
right? And that person actually still wants to work. Now, push me out if I'm 62 trying because at because I know I don't want to be working at 62. I know I'm retired, right?
Yeah,
I'm looking to retire in the next few years, honestly.
right.
But that woman still wants to work. She still loves what she's doing, what she does. She still wants to contribute.
And
She
she's
feels like
great at it.
adding value. And yes, she's great at it. Why are we pushing her out just because she's 60 something? Meanwhile, the president can be 80.
Right.
Like
Right.
of the United States. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
And I often have clients come to me who are in their 50s and 60s
Mhm,
who are looking maybe to change roles, or maybe they were laid off and they're
mhm.
looking for a new role or what have you, and there is concern, how do I even go through this interview process at my age?
Right, especially if they've been at the same company for quite some time.
Mhm. And so it's, to me, it's about telling that story of your experience and what you wanna bring to the new role, what you're excited about, how the
Mhm.
ways you're excited about growing,
Yeah, exactly.
as opposed to, well, I'm done contributing because I'm now in my 60s, which is
Mhm.
ridiculous if you wanna be working. I know you and I both were like, if I'm still working in my 60s to
Just let it go.
call
Yeah,
somebody because I need some help. But
I
there are
know.
absolutely people who want to. My mom is working and, um, does not
Mhm,
plan to retire this year or the next year, and she loves it.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, "More power to you," but if I could retire tomorrow, I would.
100%. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
parents retired early, both of them. So they never dealt with the age discrimination stuff because they retired at, like, 53 and 55 or something like
sure,
that.
right, so they weren't, like, looking for a new job in their late
Right.
50s or what have you, yeah.
Exactly, but so many people are, and that is one of the biggest struggles. The same way we talked about weight in our weight episode. If anybody wants to go back and watch that episode, we did a what episode on weight discrimination. Um,
Mhm.
the same thing we talked about is going into that next interview, you're like, what are they going to think? Nobody hires anyone over the age of XYZ, whatever that age. They start to think about things like, except for Walmart, what am I going to be, a greeter? Like they start to go all
Right.
there. They were a senior executive.
Right. And then you're bringing that energy into the interview
Mhm.
that, oh, well,
Exactly.
no one's going to want to hire me at this
Yeah,
age.
exactly.
Instead
Because
of,
yeah, because you
look at
start
the wealth of experience I bring.
exactly, because you start to think that at a
Mhm.
certain age, you're either on the advisory board, the board of advisors, that sort of level,
Mhm.
or you're retired. And so there's something in the brain where it's like, I'm I have the level of experience, but I was never a C level. So is anybody going to take me in as a board of advisors?
Right. Right. And then another thing I remind the Black women I've talked with is when they're talking about, oh, is anyone going to hire me because I'm 60? And I'm like, those people think you're 40. They can't tell how old you are. So bring that 40-year-old energy into the interview, and they don't need to know how old you are.
Someone actually told me, she said, I had someone working on my resume, and she said, remove anything before 10 years ago. She was like, only keep the stuff
Yeah.
from the last 10 years, because anything else, it's now they're looking at your age and all that other stuff. And I was like, man, really? At
Right. 10
45?
years.
Yeah, at
Right.
45? Like, I feel like I should be able to show 45. But yeah, it's still a thing.
Yeah. So maybe
So,
that's the advice is show the last 10 years of experience
mhm,
and come into the room knowing the wealth of knowledge and expertise you bring, and
exactly.
that those years of experience, in my culture, that elder that elder role is coveted.
Mhm,
You are wise, you are an example to others,
mhm.
and come with that energy.
Yes, I love it. Well, thank you all for joining us again today. We're so excited that you watched, and hopefully you continue to come with that energy, and age discrimination gets to go out the door. All right. We'll see
Absolutely.
you guys in the next episode. Take
All
care.
right. See ya. Hey, thanks for watching the Getting Black Women Paid podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, make sure you like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can catch more episodes like this one.
And join the conversation by leaving a comment below. Be sure to share this channel with incredible Black women in your life so we can continue getting Black women paid.
All right. We'll see you in the next one.